Thank you, guys. Thank you, Couchbase, for having us. We're going to get a little weird this morning. No, hopefully not too much for you all. I know the party's tonight, so you're probably still kind of fresh-faced and awake. What we're going to talk today is about a shift that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, probably the last 5 to 7 years. And this shift is really in the way that we view and the way that we value our data. Now, enterprise data has always sort of been the essence of any organization, right? This is our agility. This is our competitive differentiation. This is our intellectual property. I think the big difference that we've seen over the last few years is really in the scope of data, the different types of data, the diversity that it comes in, and the velocity and the volume in which it's coming in, which us as practitioners are suddenly expected to make sense of, to actually manage and to actually analyze. So as we sort of go through this journey, we're going to talk a bit about how we're helping organizations move from their big data initiatives being a bit of sci-fi and bringing these back into reality. So I'm Will Hayes. I'm the CEO of Lucidworks. I was originally going to come floating in on some wires in a spacesuit and smoke and lights, and then something about liability and that, so you get Photoshop instead. I apologize. At Lucidworks, we're the creators of the platform Fusion. Fusion is a search and data discovery platform. It's built on top of the most widely distributed and battle-tested open source search engine in the world, Lucene and Solr. Solr is an Apache project, which we are the commercial sponsors of. And our mission is quite simple with Fusion. Our mission is to dramatically reduce the time to market for data-driven applications for our clients. Now, prior to Lucidworks, I was a member of a founding team of a company called Splunk. And when we started Splunk, this was back in 2005, this term big data wasn't really a thing, right? We just had lots of data. I think the technical term was hella data. And then some customers kind of got into like a ton of data. And then there was sort of the outliers, which we called the assload of data. But the point was that we were seeing more and more data that was being generated in the enterprise. And of course, at Splunk, our focus was really narrowly focused on that machine data problem, helping IT operations and security and all the things that were happening around these machine events. But in a broader picture, what was starting to become clear was the difficulty that people were having in understanding information and extracting information because we were overloading human beings. Things were no longer rolling up to simple database tables and a couple thousand rows where an analyst could go through and figure it out. In fact, we were dealing in hundreds of millions, if not billions of rows. And the structure of information was changing. So this goal in becoming data-driven was becoming increasingly difficult because we weren't sure what was the data that was relevant, what was the data that was important or actionable at any given time. And this is the point of data-driven applications. It's that we want to drive action. We want to incline the user to take some action. So if we think about it in terms of something like online shopping, right? An action is pretty clear. An action is saying, I want to force them to a transaction. If we think about customer service applications, it's about getting to resolution quicker. So as we start to think about data and the surfacing of data, especially in this world of just massive amounts of information being thrown at us, we have to start to really hone in on how we can drive relevancy behind that data, how we can determine what's important behind that data. And that's why we're here today. We've teamed with Couchbase because Couchbase provides the most scalable and performant data store on the market to help drive this context behind the search index. So as we surface information, we can take millions of signals that are in and around our data and leverage those at runtime to deliver contextual results. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to map results to a user's intention. And intention is an interesting thing, but let's take a second before we get into intention and signals and those types of things, and let's just talk about data. So big data, we all hear all about it. It's huge, it's astronomical. In fact, people will say things like, by the time I finish this talk, there's been more data created since the beginning of time or the beginning of man. And we hear things like, well, if you were to put all the data into a straight line, that line would just wrap from here and around the sun 4,000 times. Well, all of these crazy claims around data, while data is truly exploding at this incredible rate, are really meant to kind of shock and awe you, right? To kind of make you anxious about an upcoming problem, hopefully get a vendor on the phone who can kind of help you tackle this mess. But the reality of big data, the reality of the promise of big data doesn't seem to quite live up to the hype just yet. So let's talk about that a little bit, but how did we sort of get to this point is an important fact, because there's been a lot of shifts in the market over the last couple of years that have made it possible for us to start wanting to ask bigger questions of our data, for us to want to extract more value. You know, the price of storage, when you look at it over the last 30 years, has dropped by about 99.9%. So for any of you in the room who aren't math majors, you can really only go down 100% before something's zero. So the price of storage has effectively become free. I remember when I got my first 256 meg key, I was pretty excited. I felt like I could store every Office document in the world. Nowadays, if I can't fit 128 gigs on something the size of my thumb, I just throw it away. It's like, no, thank you. So with this trend and the price of storage becoming free, we're able to collect more information. In addition to that, we're seeing an explosion in what we call human-generated content. So this is documents and web pages and all the unstructured data that's being generated throughout the enterprise, which we're expected to not only retain, but to actually draw meaning from. So when you combine this explosion of data and all of this information that suddenly we're being asked to retain and to understand and to ultimately leverage to drive or compel some action within our application for our users, and you combine that with the fact that the cost of storage and the cost of compute has effectively made it so we can process everything and we no longer delete anything, it's really put us into a position where big data has made us nothing but hoarders. Only in this case, we're data hoarders. We're just trying to kind of keep everything under the hood and hope that one day there's going to be some magical solution that comes out that we can actually start to leverage this or make sense of this. Either that or we're going to have to go hire 4,000 analysts to just start combing through it so we can start to get some scale there. Well, hoarding has its advantages because, again, you start to gain more insight about the organization. You can look to the past for trends that we can apply to the future. We can learn things today that we can go back over historical data and see if we can deduct any more meaning from it. But then hoarding also has its challenges because, like we talked about, this unstructured data that we're expected to extract all this meaning from and to actually make sense of and to leverage to compel these actions, it doesn't fit the old paradigm. It doesn't work when we start to put it behind the walls of things like relational databases. Because in the old days, we had an advantage. We were expected to know the questions of the data before we consumed that data, before we brought it in. Well, today, these questions are evolving all the time. And we want to be able to ask new questions of the data. And we want to look back historically and find trends that we can apply to the future and vice versa. So it's important that we have this flexibility in our models, in our taxonomies. These are no longer static constructs in which we can expect certain things up front. It's more fluid, and it's more natural. This is sort of the human interaction of data that makes it so beautiful, is that we are constantly finding new things that we want to ask of it. And in addition to that, it's important that more people in the organization get access to that data. So how many of you have actually met somebody by the title of data scientist? I'm very curious. Because I'm the CEO of a data company, I don't think I've met a single data scientist in my entire career. But what I have met are lots and lots of subject matter experts. And these are people within organizations that understand the context of information. They look to all of this chaos and all of this mess of data, and they find causation. And so how do we enable these subject matter experts? We've got to break down the walls that are preventing them access from the information that they need to do their jobs more efficiently. So we broke those walls down with technology changing to the point that we could start to store information. We gathered enough information to gather insight. We were able to provide that insight back into these analysts so they could start to plot the course of the future. But in addition to that, we needed technology from a platform standpoint to not be a barrier. This is technology like search, a natural interaction with data. There's a reason why you've never had to look at an instruction manual to go to Google. We look at technology like Couchbase server and key value stores and what these mean for the future in terms of quickly retrieving information and storing information in a way that anybody can understand it. This is really what the most important aspect of big data is all about. It's enabling those subject matter experts to do their jobs, to actually extract meaning from this information, and to use it to compel an action either internally or externally with customers. So how did we get here? Why did we get here? Because typically we gain inspiration within the enterprise. You know, the enterprise kind of looks to things like the consumer space and says, hey, there's some experiences that are starting to happen there. And in fact, it's becoming more and more of an expectation. So I remember when I started my career that there wasn't really much of an expectation that a senior manager or above would really even use email. And calendar, you can forget about it. And today, in this sort of consumer-driven world of mobile and applications, my grandma keeps tagging me on Instagram, and I can't figure out how to stop her. So suddenly there's this comfort within the enterprise that says, hey, why aren't these applications behaving more like the things that I use every day? Why am I having to ask the same questions over and over again? Why isn't data just being delivered to me in a timely and contextual manner? Because I experience that every day when I use Amazon. I use it on Facebook and Netflix. I use things like Google Now. In fact, today I was walking into the hotel and I got a notification that there was an available dinner reservation in the neighborhood. I was given the depressing scores of last night's NLDS. Go Giants. I was shown that there was a flower shop where I could pick up some flowers for my wife. And all of this information was delivered to me in a timely context. Within the enterprise now, we're seeing a demand to start to bring more contextual experiences, to understand what a user's intention is and start to deliver that context within an application. And remember, intention's an interesting thing, right? Because my intention's going to vary if I'm on a certain device between mobile and tablet, and if I'm sitting there at my laptop or at a workstation. Intention's going to vary based on where I'm located, who I am within an organization, all of the actions that I took leading up to a certain point within the application. And so being able to process and understand all of these signals and use those to drive relevancy is an important aspect of becoming data-driven. And this is where I go back to our partnership with Couchbase. In order for us to deliver this type of experience at scale, this curated data experience, this productive data experience, we need access to these signals. We need to be able to leverage them at runtime to quickly rank data and to determine what's important to a user at any given time. So let's take a minute and look at what does this mean in reality. Well, it's no secret if you use Amazon.com, you can log in, you can fill your shopping cart, and you've never even had to leave the home page. And that's not just coincidence, it's not just luck on their part. It's the fact that they're processing millions and millions of signals. They're looking at your behavior, things that you look for, things that you add to a shopping cart, things that you've bought previously. They're crowdsourcing that information with other users who are like you and trying to discover new items that you might take an action on. And so when I talk to clients, I often think about or talk about, within enterprise applications, let's take something like customer service. What is the Amazonification of that application? How do we create a productive user experience for a customer service rep so they're able to close a call quickly, to get to a resolution quickly? Well, this is a customer service portal that has access to all of the information about a customer, about their history, about the products that they purchased. In addition to that, we're looking at information about customers with similar products. We're looking to resolutions from those customers, and we're using all of that information to get to a quicker resolution time. If we take a step back with all of that additional data and all those signals, we might find opportunities to cross-sell and upsell additional products and services. So we start to bring that productive data experience right back into one of our most mission-critical applications, which is the interface between us and either an eager customer or a frustrated customer. Google Now. Google Now is processing signals around who you are, where you are, your email, your calendar, and it's delivering you timely, contextual results. And this is no longer a search application where we're asking questions in order to retrieve information. It's actually surfacing information because as new insight is discovered, as new insight is made, as new discoveries are made, these discoveries are being delivered to you in this timely, contextual fashion. If you think about what does Google Now really mean from a day-to-day, well, it's about helping us optimize our daily decision-making. It's helping us manage risk, because the risk of being tardy or the risk of missing a change of venue can really screw up your day. So when I think about how do we apply these concepts of all of these signals and all of this context to the enterprise, I think about financial services. In some organizations, fraud is costing up to $5 billion a year. That's a painful loss for a lot of these organizations. And one of the issues is the inability to quickly respond to incidents as they happen, because there's millions, if not hundreds of millions of transactions that are going on. And with the search engine, we have the ability to consume all of the data about those transactions, to classify that data, to understand the content, to understand the patterns, and determine what might represent a fraudulent case. Looking at the transactions and understanding that somebody who's committing a transaction from this part of the country and this part of the country, it probably doesn't make sense, or within a particular time span, to find people who are gaming the system. And let's not forget that in fraud, it's not just the people outside, but sometimes we have to be concerned about the people inside. In fact, data loss prevention has become a top initiative for a number of major financial organizations because of the damage that it can cause when we have intellectual property that's leaking, when we have some of the core of our business getting out there into the open and diluting our competitive advantage. So by processing information about transactions, by looking at the content of these transactions and understanding them and classifying them, we're not necessarily going to get to a world where we can automatically block everything, and we probably don't want to, because not everything that looks suspicious is malicious. But this goes back to that SME, that subject matter expert, that human aspect of your data-driven application. We need to start surfacing information quicker. We need to deliver alerts. We need to deliver insight into areas that need a human review to determine when something is fraudulent, to block certain transactions, or to investigate certain internal actors. In addition to that, we need models that are constantly evolving because these threats are always changing. I remember talking to a client that said, the way that we handle data loss prevention today is we look at the attachments of emails, and if it matches a document name of something that we know is a sensitive document, then we block it. And I'm thinking, okay, I think my little brother could figure out a way to get around that type of security, when in reality, it's the content of that transaction that needs to be looked at. So these are all very noble causes, and they're things that we can get excited about, improving customer satisfaction, providing better ways to stop fraudulent activity within financial services. But there's social implications as well, things like healthcare. There was a study that was done by McKinsey that said by leveraging all of the data that we have available today, we can reduce the cost of healthcare from $300 to $400 billion in the United States alone. It's an astronomical figure. And what that means is that we're starting to take into consideration everything we know about disease, about symptoms, about trends and environmental factors and social factors that lead to these problems. And we're leveraging this information at decision-making time in order to provide proactive diagnosis, preventative medicine, and preventative care. So by making all this data available to people who can understand it and delivering it in a performant fashion, we can change the way that we deliver healthcare in this country and prevent things like disease and sickness from multiplying at these alarming rates that we're seeing. So when we think about, what do all these things have in common, all of these problems that we've described, these use cases that we've described, these are all search applications. I see a lot of people like, what? No, I don't see any box. Well, the truth is that search has evolved to much more than just that little box that sits on top of a website. Yeah, it's great when I can go in and I can ask a question, or I can go and retrieve some information based off of keywords or quotes. But search is so much more than that. Search is the container that contains all of your data. It can classify that data. It contains metadata and understanding around that data. But in addition to that, it represents the human experience with that data, because search is the keeper of truth of how people are accessing information, the questions that they're asking. This is the future of human-computer interaction, is taking all of this information and surfacing critical insight when necessary, and understanding intention and understanding context. And of course, we can't do this without having access to all of these signals, places to store them that are redundant, that are fast, that are outperforming a lot of the traditional data stores that are out there. This is why, again, we've partnered with Couchbase, because by coupling these two technologies, we can start to achieve this reality. When people ask me, well, what do you think about the Internet of Things and where do you think the industry's heading? I go back to my human answer. The Internet of Things, to me, is not just a bunch of devices that are communicating and making decisions and automating the entire world. The Internet of Things is about everything that I interact with as an individual and how it's surfacing information that's critical to me based on the services and devices and applications and the things that I'm doing daily. And this is the reality that we're creating within the enterprise. And we're very excited to be here, and we're very excited to be teaming with Couchbase and be a part of this event, because this is an exciting future. For anybody who's involved in this movement, For us at Lucidworks, for the team at Couchbase, we couldn't be happier with where the industry's heading, with where our customers are pulling us. So I encourage you to come talk to us. We're right out here in the pavilion. We'd be very excited to talk to you, and we encourage you to start thinking about your data-driven initiatives as no longer as sci-fi. Let's get to the reality. Let's figure out how we can transform the way that you're doing business and empower both internally and externally the productivity that people are having within your applications. Thank you very much.